Bienvenidos, good morning. Muy buenos días a todos. Happy Thursday. Today we're having a pretty important presentation regarding representation matters. We're going to talk about Latinos in the state, as always, but we're also going to talk about it from the perspective of the census and redistricting and what that means for us in terms of representation across the state at every level. I'm going to add a blog that I wrote recently to the chat related to representation matters that goes into some detail about how important this is to us as a community and why it's important to the state of Maryland, because it's not just for us, it's for everybody, right? So let me begin by telling you a little bit about Maryland nonprofit, not Maryland nonprofits. You know about Maryland nonprofits, about Maryland Latinos Unidos. We are a program of Maryland nonprofits. We're a year old, and we're a statewide association of Latino and Latino serving nonprofits, community leaders, and small businesses. We were launched with two primary objectives. One was to meet the urgent needs of COVID, for which we helped to create a coalition of amazing community-based organizations, including CASA, the City of Annapolis, CHEER, and Center of Help. We love these folks. They are amazing, but also Johns Hopkins University and George Washington University. The other objective is really what we're going to focus on today, which is representation, to build an equitable infrastructure to address the many disparities and barriers faced by Latinos in the state of Maryland. Our focus has not been only on community health, but also the social determinants behind that, which affect all of us, which are housing, education, employment, and all those other factors, including leadership and representation. Could you start the slides, please? Thank you. So the next page. So what we see here is the change in population statewide. We know that the Latino population grew exponentially to 12%. I say exponentially because, well, you'll see why in the next slide. You know, that doesn't seem like a lot, but with the shrinking of the Anglo population and the stability and good size of the African-American population and the growth of the Asian population, what we see now is truly multicultural state. We're not, you know, we really are starting to balance out population-wise. Next slide, please. So what I want you to focus on here is that these are what we call lovingly the big five. This is where 60% or more of the Latino population resides. And this is also where I think you can see the exponential size of things. So we know Montgomery County is the largest county. The growth there went from 17% to 21%, that's 5 points. Prince George's grew, again, 6 points, or I'm sorry, 7 points, 6 points, from 15% to 21%, almost 75,000 new residents in Prince George's County. When you look at Baltimore City, we don't think of Baltimore City as being a significant Latino population, that there's about 46,000 Latinos there. I'm sure it's probably closer to 50,000. And that's the thing. There was so many questions about the census and so many challenges because of the what was going to be the supposedly the citizenship question that was not ultimately wasn't added. That probably set folks back from wanting to fulfill out the census. But then that gets us also to Baltimore County, and here again you see a 2% growth, or a 2-point growth, and that takes us from almost 40,000 to over 60. So these are big populations. Each and every one could be a town in and of itself, if you just think about the population growth. And of course, then there's an Anne Arundel, which is gone from 6% to 10% Latino, and from around 33,000 to close to 59,000. I always like to raise the issue of Annapolis. Here's our state capital, and we're now at 22.8% of the state capital. There are those in the state capital who say it's closer to 25,000, again, because of the census, the doubts about the census. And I think people just, we know our communities, right? So next slide. So this is also an important graph because it shows you, now these numbers are a little bit older. These are from 2017, 2018. And we pull them together from a number of sources. But what you'll see here is in the light blue, that is the percent of the Latino population in the county. In the darker blue, it's the numbers of students in the school system. So as you can see, our population is very young. Next slide. And this demonstrates that in 10 of the 24 counties, Latinos comprise more than 10% of the student body. In 3 of these counties, they represent 20% or more. And in 1 county, Prince George's, again, that Delegate Peña-Melnyk represents, has close to 40% Latinos in the student body. All right. So this gets me to my wonderful guests that are with me today. Delegate Joseline Peña-Melnyk represents District 21, which covers Anne Arundel and Prince George's. She's a tireless advocate for Maryland and within Maryland for the Latino community that resides here. She doesn't just represent her counties, she represents all of us. She's tireless, like I said, and it's just incredible. Everywhere we go, she's there, and it's just amazing. The other presenter today is Ashanti Martinez, and he's our next generation, and I think he's even a mentee of yours, Delegate Peña-Melnyk. He's been celebrated for his vision of the future and named one of the top 30 under 30, as well as received the Futurist Award, which I just love. And his current role is as Research and Policy Analyst for CASA. But most recently, and the reason why I really wanted him to join us today is because he's been working with the redistricting process and really standing up for Latinos in terms of presenting why it's important to ensure that Latino communities are represented when we rethink the line drawing for the state, because this has political impact and impact related to resources for all of us. So welcome to both of you. Allow me to begin with you, Delegate Peña-Melnyk. You're the vice chair of the Maryland Latino Legislative Caucus. You're one of 4 Latinos in the state legislature. You're from one of the counties with the most densely populated Latino demographics. You've been engaged in this process for a long time. So I'd like for you to talk to us broadly from your perspective as a legislator, but also just as a representative of your community. What does representation in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion look like and mean to you? And what does it mean for Prince George's and Anne Arundel? Please.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Dr. Lemus. It's an honor to be here with all of you and with Ashanti, who is really an amazing, he's like my son. I love him very much. Look, if you're not at the table, you're not part of the solution. And when we are creating policy, especially at the state level, it is great to have different perspectives, different views, so the policy can be a lot stronger so that we can have democracy. So Maryland, despite having close to 1 million immigrants in the state and contributing to over 60% of our total population growth for the past 2 decades, we have not done a respectable job in integrating immigrants into the state and making them part of Maryland. Immigrants communities are hard workers. You know, I came to this country at 8 years old with my mother from Dominican Republic. My mom didn't speak English. She was a single mom. We ended up in New York City. You know, I remember seeing her struggles And I remember going to the social services office where I would volunteer for everyone that was waiting there, because my mom, I knew a little English, and she would say, hey, my daughter can translate for you. And I remember early on at 8, learning about our struggles, not knowing the language, you know, getting used to a new environment, and how it was important to have a voice. At that age, my mom will call me la abogadita, the little lawyer. And you have to be careful with the power of words and children, because I did become a lawyer, and I was first in my family to go to college and to go to law school. And as a lawyer, I wanted to be a voice for those marginalized communities, right? Because it was so important to be present. And I became a public defender and then a prosecutor later on in life. And now in the General Assembly. And I can tell you why representation matters at every level. In the General Assembly, we have 188 members, 141 in the House and 47 in the Senate. We have 24 jurisdictions in Maryland, over 6 million people, right? So 23 counties in Baltimore City. In the General Assembly, I'm one of four. Okay, if you look at our population, it's just not right. So what we did was we decided to create a Latino legislative caucus in the General Assembly. So we have 2 recognized caucuses, the Black Caucus, which I'm a proud member for over 15 years as a Black Latina, and the Women Caucus. So we created the Latino Caucus, and the story of how we formed that, it would take too long. It's another conversation. It was very difficult, okay, to be accepted, and we had to fight to be recognized, but we did it. But what we did was we recognized we're only 4. And then I thought, but wait a second, my colleagues, we're all immigrants, okay? And we all represent people that are immigrants in our district. So I created an associate membership, and we grew to 64 members because it's important to have support. And then we started forming relationships with the Black Caucus to amplify our voice, because it was very lonely to be one of 4. It is important for the following reasons. In the General Assembly, you know, in 2013, we passed a bill that actually allowed driver's licenses to people without having to prove their immigration status. And almost 40,000 Marylanders filed proof of what we require, the 2-year taxes, and also they passed the exam. But if we were not there, we could not make that argument. We could not bring that experience to say this is why it's important for, you know, people that are undocumented to have a driver's license. You know, the same issue happened this past session where we were looking to pass, and we did an amazing job in a humble way, you know, a bill to give tax relief when people file for their Maryland earned income tax. So in Maryland, we have about 89,000 people that file their taxes, they're ITIN holders, right? They don't have a Social Security. So when we were looking at passing this bill, they were not included. They contributed last year over $139 million they paid in taxes, state taxes to Maryland. And here is this population that does not have a Social Security number, which many of them work, and their employers pay taxes, and they are not able to get these programs that we have at the state level because of the requirement that they have a Social Security number. So we, the caucus, organized, and we talked to leadership, and they were wonderful, the Speaker and the Senate President. And we explained why we could not take a vote, because for me, it's a moral vote that did not include them. And we organized the caucus, and we organized the Black Caucus as well, and Asian Caucus, and we made that argument. So we passed a bill that includes them now. So representation matters, because if we're not present, we are an afterthought, we are invisible. And it really is important because they are here, they matter. And in many instances, We don't have in Prince George's County, for example, the students, almost 40% of the students in the public school system are Latinos. The school board has 13 members, 9 elected, 4 appointed. Not one Latino school board member presently. How can you be what you can't see?
Mm-hmm.
It is important to be present. It is important to have a voice. That is why it's important.
I think sometimes, you know, Rue is
Hang
growing.
on.
You know, she's you know.
Thanks. Somebody.
Sometimes
Thank you.
I want to say.
Thank you, Delegate Peña-Melnyk. I'm always stunned when I hear that there's no representation on the school boards. I mean, in generally, that's where our students are, right? That's where our kids are, and that's the future. El futuro es Latino, right? Our Latino future is there, and without that representation at the table, it makes it very challenging, I think, for us to see the evolution that needs to happen and the future leadership. And I'll get back to that. Let me ask Ashanti to join us also. Ashanti, so like I said, you've been representing us at the redistricting meetings, us meaning the 744,000 Latinos that are in the state, much appreciated. I know it's there hasn't been a lot of discussion about Latino representation at the redistricting level. I've attended several of these meetings. I was wondering if you could share with us the issue, right? Why is redistricting important to us? Why now? Looking, I mean, it's the next 10 years, right? Why should it matter to the community? And what do you want us all to know and think about as we talk about redistricting? And why should it matter to Maryland?
No, absolutely. So good morning, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to address all of you about something that's really near and dear to my heart, which is redistricting. You know, at CASA, we have done a lot of work in the last few months prior to the redistricting process with the census, getting our community counted, making sure that we knew exactly where each and every one of us stood, and so that we could have an accurate count of how we draw the lines during the redistricting process and how we essentially grow our representation. Redistricting is so vitally important because we are carving out our communities, and then we are able to elect members of those carved out districts that could go to the halls of power and speak truth to the issues that are facing our community. If we're not, as Delegate Peña-Melnyk said, if we are not at the table, we oftentimes are on the menu. So apologize, my dog wants to play right now, and so you might hear him in the background. But you know, it truly is a really essential process to our democracy, is participating and telling people how their community should look, how communities should be put together during this process. When you look at districts like 47 in Prince George's County, 47B is the only immigrant Latino sub-district, but we know there's pockets of other districts that potentially could be carved out in a similar way to help us grow that number from 4 to potentially 8 to 16 to other numbers in the future. And this is why this is so important, because like you said, these districts are set for the next decade. This is what we're going to have to play with. This is the map in which we have to engage with for the next 10 years. And so having our voices at the forefront of that process ensures that these maps are fair, that they're accurate, and that they truly represent the communities of Maryland. And so that's why I've been talking to the Governor's Citizens Redistricting Commission. That's why I've been active with the Legislature's Advisory Commission. That's why I've been in the counties talking at Montgomery and Prince George's, where we have the largest populations, trying to make sure that we have equitable districts and we are truly represented in the right way.
Can I ask you both? This is sort of an opinion question, I guess. Do you feel that it's challenging to sort of explain this to our community, why that matters and why we should be involved?
I'll start. I don't think so. I think people understand bread and butter issues. I think they understand if they have someone who comes from their community that's at the table to demand what their community needs, they want that. People want representation. They want to see ourselves elevated in places of power and in positions that can make a difference. And so ultimately, I think when you explain it in a way you meet people where they're at, right? You don't get into the nuance of the numbers and, communities of interest and all that.
Yeah.
You let them know what it is in the way that they can understand. And I think just meeting people where they're at, the organizer in me is good at that. And that's something that we have to do because these issues are important to all of us. It's not just the 30,000 feet folks, it's everyone at the grassroots is impacted. And so we have to communicate it in a way that they get it. And oftentimes they do. People understand power, people understand representation. So.
It's not a challenge, people get it. It's just that we must be intentional about it and make it a priority, right? Mm-hmm. And priorities are funded. So you have to go into the community, you provide translation, you provide interpretation, the documentation in different languages. The messenger must also be a trusted source, right? Because mm-hmm. many immigrants come to this country and they're, they have been, some of them persecuted in their countries. They don't have a trust for government. So mm-hmm. you have to be creative when you get out there, but we get it. I mean, I have many supporters that are immigrants that understand the importance, why I need to be in Annapolis, to be their voice. I mean, I represent everyone, right? As a Black Latina, I represent everyone, but I bring a unique perspective that I share that helps the community. Mm-hmm. And that's important.
I agree. So I want to get into more of a round robin kind of session. Also for the audience, please put questions in the chat. But I'll take the moderator's prerogative and start off with, I really see this as opening the door, right? And how do we open the door? What does that look like when we do, right? And you've already said it. It's good. People want to see themselves reflected back at them, whether it's a teacher in a school or a doctor or a state legislator or a member of Congress or senator. It's always positive because you realize that you understand them, you hear them, and that they have a role to play as well. So how do we open the door? Some more. Let's dig down into that. Delegate.
I think that, for example, if you have a business, again, you have to be intentional about recruitment. Mm-hmm. You have to be intentional to let your HR person know that you will like diversity, but it's not just diversity, it's also inclusion, right? That person is going to truly have a voice. That mm-hmm. you recruit and you find people that are qualified, and there are many mm-hmm. people like to say, oh, they're not qualified. I couldn't find any qualified person. Well, that's BS, because I know many qualified people. You just have to go out there and do recruitment, right? So for example, in Prince George's County, the county executive has 40 people, about 40 people that lead our agencies, and there's not one Latino represented. Right. Now, you can't tell me that you can't find one out of 40. Yes, you can't. I mean, the head of the police department, she found him in Texas. Okay, so what do? You get a recruiter, right? And you get a recruiter and you pay that recruiter to go and find some candidates. It's mm-hmm. important to do that. Mm-hmm. You can't just say, I would like a diverse and inclusive workforce and not invest in it and not take steps to do that. Mm-hmm. And you can go mm-hmm. recruit. You can go recruit to New York, Puerto Rico, Massachusetts, mm-hmm. California, Florida. You want teachers? We hardly have any teachers, probably not even 2%. You go to the schools, to the colleges, and you start recruiting. You want to create a pipeline, you start early in middle school, right? In high school, right. All right? It's about doing the work. And again, having a purpose, right, an intention to really bring us on, because it's you made it a priority.
Right. Ashanti, I know that's tough to follow, but how do you see opening the door?
No, I think the delegate spoke to it precisely. I think it's intentionality. But I also think for us as a community, it's not waiting or having assumptions that other people in places of power, just because they see our numbers, will include us in these processes or positions or places of power. We really have to demand it. And I think it comes from voting in large blocks. I think it comes from making our voices heard, whether that's calling and reaching out to folks like the county executive in Prince George's or other places where we're not represented to the fullest extent that we need to. As a community, I think we do have to make sure that folks know we are a presence, and make sure that they know that they are on task for making sure that we're represented in all of the spaces that matter. But to Joseline's point, if they want us in the room, we would be there. And so intentionality is really important in this conversation. But also it's about making sure that we are at the heads of the table, making those decisions as well. You know, when Latinos are running for office, support them. When individuals are stepping up, be able to, you know, be that extra step, that extra help for those individuals as a community. And collectively, we need to come together and make sure that happens as well, so that we're not begging other people to do what's right. We can just do it ourselves.
Right. Right. So intentionality is critical, but it's also putting our hat in the ring, right?
Yep.
We have to be willing to take a chance, I think, to be willing to say, you know, it's a risk, right? Well, it shouldn't be a risk, but sadly it's become a risk in a lot of ways with social media.
For example, let me tell you why it matters to have all kinds of people at the table. During the COVID pandemic in Prince George's County, and I represent both gorgeous Prince George's and gorgeous Anne Arundel with the same passion, okay? Let's just start there. So in Prince George's, for example, what we discover with COVID is that out of the 24 jurisdictions, the county with the highest number of COVID-19 cases in the whole state was gorgeous Prince George's. The zip code with the highest number of COVID-19 cases in the entire state was 20783. Now, you know who lives in 20783? The immigrant Latino community, the Hyattsville, Langley Park, Adelphi area. So it's really, we know why, because of those social determinants of health, right? It is the way we live. Like I knew families, they were living in an apartment, 10 of them, and one of them would be positive, then all of them were positive, because I did a lot of food distribution every single day. It is the lack of education, the lack of transportation, the lack of money, the environment, you name it. So what did we do? We opened a facility for testing all the way at Six Flags. Now, if you think about what 20783 is, a lot of our people in our community do not have vehicles. They rely on public transportation. It was difficult for them to get there. So, okay, that was a state facility. But then the county opened a facility and didn't open it in that zip code, okay? It did not. So I call and I say, can we get a facility in 20783 so that people can get tested? No, we were not the first, the second, or the third. If I tell you what I had to do and who I had to get on the phone and do a conference call to get them to open a facility in 20783. It shouldn't be that difficult. But if you had someone like me at the table, they would tell you, wait a minute, look at this community. Look at how, you know, it's a dense community. It doesn't have transportation. They don't lack the language. They don't speak the language. Can we partner with an organization like CASA, which is what they ended up doing because I brought them to the table. So and that happens, that's just healthcare, right? So it's every system, right? Education, you name it, every system in society. And it's so important to be present.
That's right. That's right. So you're actually kind of bringing us into the next set of questions, which is addressing the barriers, which is precisely what you just demonstrated, right? And as Ashanti was speaking, I was thinking to myself, you know, Frederick Douglass, what did he say? Power concedes nothing without a demand. Never did, and it never will. So part of it is we have to make our needs known, and we have to be vocal about it. What kind of barriers beyond what we know, language and cultural competency, do we need to bear in mind in attaining power for Latinos at the municipal, county, and state levels? And I'm not saying, you know, get in a fight with so-and-so. I really am thinking more, are there structural barriers that we should take into consideration that on the issue of advocacy, as we make our voices heard, that we could be moving on? What do we need to pay attention to as Latino Marylanders? Either one.
Ashanti, you can go ahead and address that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, which is why there could be a million different ways to answer it.
Answer it, exactly. It's broad.
I think when I think of local, municipal, county government, what the barriers are for our community, it's often just simple participation, knowing that there's meetings happening, knowing that there's elections happening, understanding how we can participate, what the process is. There's a lot of ways that these structures are built to disadvantage working people from even being a part of or involved. Like if you're having a council meeting at 3 p.m., you know, working folks can't attend, right? I think with the virtual space with Zoom, you've expanded access to so many people because we don't physically have to be present in spaces any longer in order to participate. But I think meeting times, I think process, I think structure is often a barrier. But I also think of the way our communities are structured, our infrastructure, having access to public transit. Are all of our halls of power accessible by public transit? I can tell you as someone who doesn't like to drive, going to Annapolis without a car is literally an all-day experience.
It is.
And so how can we break down some of those barriers so that we're making these places more accessible to more Marylanders and all of us? And I think too, we as a community have to begin to think strategically, and Delegate Peña-Melnyk spoke this earlier, about how we can work in collaboration and in coalition with other minority groups that often aren't at the tables as well. Our issues are often very similar and the same, and we cannot legislate in silos or in islands. We have to be in broad coalitions that bring us forward, that are going to fight for issues that impact working families. And that's something that I do every day at CASA, bringing voice to people that are supposed to be voiceless. We have to work in cross collaboration with other groups, whether it's faith-based, whether it's nonprofit, whether it's advocacy, whether it's even on the political side. You know, CASA in Action is our C4 sister organization that does knock on the doors, make the phone calls, and donate to the candidates, because having us present and our advocacy for our communities present is so really vital. So it's multiple approaches, but we have to be attentive to all of the various barriers, from transportation to process, that impact our community's participation in a lot of these halls of power.
So allow me to dig down a little bit on one particular process, and I hope we can understand a little bit of what happened. The recent Blueprint for Education demanded or required an accountability and implementation board. And there was this whole nominations process, and no Latino was embraced to hold accountability. And there's resources lots of resources in the billions of dollars that are going to be going into the school system over the next 10 years. Could either of you talk a little bit about the lessons related to that we can take away from this experience?
Yes, so as you know, I am very proud of having voted for the blueprint, and I know the importance of it. And we had a lot of advocates that were present at the table, including CASA and ACLU and others, you know, to make the point for marginalized communities, right? And for the immigrant community, particularly, you know, the ESOL language kids, right? And so forth. So we found out that the AIB nominating committee was going to send names to the governor, and they sent 9 names to the governor, and 4 were African Americans, 4 whites, and 1 Asian. When the Maryland Legislative Latino Caucus discovered that, we immediately penned a letter, and we wrote to the nominating commission on how we were just shocked that the community that is the fastest growing in the state, and we grew in every single county, all 24 jurisdictions according to the census. And in some school districts like Prince George's, Montgomery, we are almost 40%. And in some schools, I have schools that are, my kids are, you know, they're more than 50% of the school, that we could not have one seat. That was shameful. And how did that happen? And I did call Senator Pinsky, who was the chair, and I said, you know, Paul, what happened here? It's like when you're in a room, you must put on a equity lens, a racial equity lens, and look around, who is missing? Don't tell me that there were not qualified people, because I know of 3 that apply, including one woman who was actually the president of the Maryland PTA for the entire state. A woman who is a lawyer, who had a child when she was 15, who was a migrant worker, who went to college and knows about the value of education and how it's a great equalizer. So don't tell me that she did not qualify. I thought that was just...
Wasn't she also on the Kirwan Commission?
Yes, she was. So
for 6 years.
What do we have to do to qualify? What are the standards that we have for our community? And we wrote to the governor, we wrote to them, and the governor actually wrote a letter in response, and they actually refused to send new names. So their response was, well, the community can come and give testimony, their 2-year terms. Well, no, it's very different to go and give testimony where someone has to accept it than to actually be at the table where you can guide the policy and the decisions.
Right, right. And that's proof of everything you've just said, why it's important. Delegate, I don't want to rush you out the door, but we're at 9:39. If you
I
need
have
to
a
hop
few
off.
more minutes. I have until 9:33.
Okay, then please. I want to get everything out of you. So let's talk a little bit then about opportunities. You know, I like to always look at things from both sides of the process, right? There's the barriers and then there's the opportunities. And I honestly believe barriers can become opportunities, but we have to be smart about it. What kind of opportunities moving forward do you think we have available? Obviously, if there's no representation, it's wide open. So there's all kinds. But what kind of moment are we in today? I feel personally that we're at a pivot point, but what do you think?
I'll take a stab at this. I really do think, you know, right now in Maryland, we are in a monumental moment. You know, the top 3 constitutional offices in our state are up for grabs: governor, attorney general, comptroller. We have a whole host of individuals that are leaving the legislature. We have new council districts popping up in places like Montgomery County, where we have a huge number of our community residing. Prince George's County, we're going through a similar process of redistricting. There's a lot of legislative or elected opportunities where we can get in our folks, we can get in folks that support our community. And we have to be really intentional about that. The next few years are really going to be important. And we saw with COVID that there are so many disparities that are amongst our community in particular. And the only way those things get fixed, the only way we start building out that safety net for our families is having individuals in place with that intentionality, that come to the halls of power with that charge, with that demand, with that energy. And we've got to elect new leaders. We've got to do our best to make sure that our government and our representation is reflective of our communities. And so this moment to me is so important. I think if COVID hasn't shown you that we need a change, you definitely need to wake up. You know, over 700,000 Americans are gone because of lack of leadership, right? We have a virus that could have probably been under control a lot better than what we currently are having if we had individuals in place from the county level to the state level to the national level, and our communities hurt because of that. And so elections matter. right? And we have to take 2022 extremely seriously, the redistricting process extremely seriously, the same way we did with Census. I mean, a lot of us on this call, I remember doing so much outreach, phone calls. I mean, I was knocking doors for Census almost daily for weeks, trying to get our community to be counted, right? To show up and say, I am here, I am present, I matter, see me. And that is so vitally important. And now it's our moment to elect folks so that we are at the decision-making tables, so that we can make the proper choices for our families.
So I am intentional in my office. So every session, I make sure that I recruit interns for the Latino caucus from the community in my office as well. I can tell you that I have, in a humble way, helped a lot of my interns go to med school, go to law school. I stay in their lives. I recruit, I have well, I'm going to say it here, but a private group of women, and we meet every Sunday night, and we have been recruiting people to run for office. And we review their website. We talk to them about fundraising. I actually mentor Ashanti as well, because you have to really create a pipeline. Right. And also you start at the very level of the municipal level, which I did this past year. I door knock for some Latino and immigrant candidates, and we did really well. We won in many races, and I was out there on Saturdays and Sundays, you know, door knocking and giving money and helping. So we have to do that. It has to be, again, I think the key word here is intentional, right? Because we have to create that pipeline as well for us to have leaders. We have to support our nonprofits, which is so important as well. And we have to be at every level of government. I personally make it a point to do a lot of mentorship because I'm not going to stay in this seat forever. And you have to start thinking, who's going to be the next Joseline? And am I doing a good job that I'm going to leave that door open? That when they see us, they say, well, that's a hard worker, right? It's kind of sad that we have to think that way, but it's such a responsibility so that we are judged fairly.
Mm-hmm. I completely concur with that. For me, the issue of building a pipeline is primary among all the work that I do. And I so admire that you live your word, right? You're mentoring young people, and we have to be able to, and I encourage this from all of us, that we look over our shoulder and that we're bringing people up, not just, you know, we're not just giving them like a hand, we're actually helping lift them and amplify them and help them with all those processes, because it's a lot of processes. So we have about 15 more minutes. Are there any questions from the audience that we would like to discuss?
And I have to apologize, but I need to go. Actually, there's a program that I'm going to be interviewed on that will give grants for health disparities. And again, I'm trying to get the information to our community so that we can participate as well. So I have an interview that I am doing. I apologize. This is important work, what you're doing. I know Ashanti can handle it. I'm so proud of him. You know, he's the future. And I really think that we need to work together, that we need to be loud. We're not angry at all. We just want to be part of the solution, and we want to be at the table. We want our perspective to matter, and we have so much to contribute, and we want to be given a chance. That's all.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
I was just screaming Joseline for president as she runs off.
Joseline for president. Woo!
Have a blessed day.
You too.
You're in good hands with Ashanti.
Oh, thank you. So I saw a question from, let's see, it says here, you mentioned how the city remapping will affect the Latino population. Can you provide some concrete examples?
Yeah, so I'll bring up 47, District 47 in Prince George's County as a key example. 47B, which is a sub-district of the district, is primarily Latino and population. And so if they were in redistricting process to take away that sub-district and have 47 be similar to other districts like District 24 or other districts in the state where they're at large completely, it might be much harder for a Latino to run and have a seat at the table. And so having intentionality, and when we're building out these maps, carving out places where our communities exist so that we can elect representation that we believe represents us is really key.
Okay, we have a question from Laura Gutierrez. Let's, if you could unmute yourself, Laura. Or I'll unmute you, let's see. Could somebody unmute Laura, please?
Hi, I think that's actually Katina with my name right there with the question.
Oh.
I said
Oh,
Heather.
is it me? Wait, no.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it was more of a comment in terms of the representation. The flip side is that when one of us gets into a position, it doesn't matter if it's a senior or junior position, if we weren't intended to be in that position and it was sort of forced upon the institution, it is very likely that that one Latino is going to have a difficult time, especially if they weren't wanted. It can be a very isolating experience. And if the position doesn't have policy, legislative, or a budget, while the work is still important, it really just becomes a figurehead for the position. So then there are internal challenges that the one person faces, and then the unrealistic expectation from the community that's put on the one person. You know, our people in these positions aren't God. Most are doing the best that they can. But if we are not wanted by an entity and we're forced, and now we join the entity because of political pressure, it is highly unlikely that that person is going to succeed because they weren't on the radar to begin with.
So basically what I'm hearing, Katina, is that, you know, well, obviously there's always politics, right? Put two people in a room, there's a political situation, but also it's about helping to build infrastructure in a different way, one that is intentional, but also supportive, and that the support people who are, there need to be people, allies and support people in place who can help you do your job, do the things that you're supposed to do and assigned to do. Otherwise, and this goes again then to the leadership up on top, they have to be intentional with what they're asking you to do and give you the support that you need so that you can be successful.
Correct.
And that's an ongoing challenge, I think. Here's another question related to Latinos for position in politics, office, government, and boards. In San Antonio, we have the Boardroom Project. The Hispanic Chamber has several programs, Latina Leadership Institute, Alexander Briseño Program. What organizations in our city are preparing young people and or Latinos for positions in office, government, and boards? Do you want to talk a little bit about this, Ashanti? I think you've been sort of leading us in this in many ways, and you're the product.
Yeah, there are a few organizations here in the state of Maryland that I've been a part of that helped grow my leadership and just has helped provide access and opportunity. The most recent one was New Leaders Council of Maryland. They have a chapter here that's statewide. There's about 25 to 30 fellows that are picked every year, and they go through different trainings and exercises and workshops that allow them to learn about just Maryland itself, about how our government and how our processes are structured, but also understanding that leaders look very differently in various spaces. Not all of our leaders are going to be delegates. Some of them are going to be doctors. Some of them are going to be nonprofit leaders. Some of them are going to be community leaders. And how do we cultivate our leadership skills and styles to be as effective change makers as possible? So I really enjoyed being a 2020 fellow with the New Leaders Council, and encourage you all to support them, as well as get other young folks to join. I think I was one of 4 out of the 20 that was Latino. So not a huge representation, but better than some other places in the state. I know too, the counties, Montgomery and Prince George's, both have like Leadership Prince George's or Leadership Montgomery that are great programs that also will help educate you and help you just learn about the local government, learn from other leaders, whether they're department and agency heads, understanding what they do in a day-to-day, how they manage their staffs, but also how those local governments function is really important. And then depending on your political persuasion, you know, I got my start in Young Democrats of Prince George's County at 14, organizing my high school, getting people registered to vote, because in Maryland, you can register to vote at 16.
Started early.
I did. You got to start early and often. I think it's one of those things where if you see someone that has a drive, a passion, you know, I growing up, I was the kid that talked too much. But I was lucky enough to have a support system that said, you're not a bad kid, you're just someone that's going to go into politics, or someone that's going to go into speaking or something like that, and channel that energy. I think we have to do a really good job at trying to direct and tailor programs for our youth and our future, because that is so important. Joseline has been a huge help for me. I worked for her on her congressional campaign, and literally I'm like her son. She calls me, it's like, so what's going on? Are you working out? Are you dating? You know, it's just about the holistic person and not just about the politics. You know, we have to understand that we're building people, and that's so vitally important. But I will put in the chat information about New Leaders Council, and how you guys can get involved as well. But those types of organizations, I think we have to be part of, but also there's nothing that I think centers just Latino voices. And so how can we create something like, how can we be the catalyst that brings about a lot of change? I think it's something that we need to think about as well.
And one of our colleagues, Abel Olivo, is saying that we need more structural capacity. He is echoing what you're saying, that there are a handful of Latino-centric organizations, and that really we need more Latino-led organizations on the ground, which maybe this is a great segue for you, Veronica, on why you wanted to create and brought together this amazing steering committee of ours. Oh, I see Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth. I saw Joe was on here with us, and Alberto, and all our friends. And what is your vision for leadership?
Thank you. And I'm just so thrilled to be, again, on these meetings. I just get all jazzed up. So we founded Maryland Latinos Unidos, Joseline, Cecia, Elda de Varis, because everything you're saying on the chat is what we kept noticing. And the fact that we don't have a home was the reason we couldn't get ahead. We couldn't scale. CASA does amazing work. LAYC does amazing work, but we can't just have 2-3 organizations. That's an overwhelming bottleneck. You know, they're rock stars. Ashanti's awesome, but Ashanti can't fix everything. As you heard him say and Joseline say, this is an ongoing complex issue. So I heard a whole bunch of things. Our steering committee, first of all, thank you so much. Everything we do is volunteer and it's needed. So we need to change the discussion by having representation, which is the whole genesis for this membership session. So I heard Joseline and Ashanti, and obviously Dr. Lima say this a couple of times, but intentionality. So Maryland Latinos Unidos is a membership-based organization. I don't want you to hear, oh my God, I got to pay something. If you have the funds, if your organization has the funds, we obviously welcome the funds. But if you're an individual, if you're a professional, if you are a visionary, we have scholarships. The short issue, the brief issue is if we're not collaborating, then we're working in silos, which prevents us from advancing. And the minute you get pregnant, divorced, fired, hired, relocated, se jodió tu trabajo. Your job is done. So we've struggled with succession planning because everything cannot hinge on one person. Joseline, we have to bubble wrap her and pull her genes out and clone her because she can't do it all. So we have to be intentional about our succession planning and our capacity building. So let's, number one, make sure everyone that's on this chat and in this session is a member of MLU and we're networking together. And seriously, our goal is not to replace anyone. Our goal is to go, oh, so Frederick has this program. Can we amplify that and move it over to the Eastern Shore? Can we clone Ashanti and get him over to Waldorf? The whole goal is how do we collaborate strategically? So being intentional. The other thing I really want to push for is, I saw it in the chat, we only see like 3 or 4 people, right? It's always the same people over and over. I'm probably one of the faces you see a lot. We're not the only Latinos in the house. So one of the lessons I've learned from one of my mentors, Maria Martinez, Yolanda Maria Martinez, is that every time she got invited, because they need the token Latina, they don't know that they need us, but they feel like they got to check a box. It was, oh, Maria, we love to have you on the board, on the committee, on the project. And she's overwhelmed.
Oh, shoot.
So she would always come and say, yes, we're coming. Yes, we love that invitation. We are happy to come. They would never hear the word we. So here I would show up with Maria. She's holding me by the hand and she's like, we're here. And she pushed Veronica to the front. So our job is to advance each other. It seems a little simple, but we need to take the time when we get those invitations for board participation, for strategic roles, jobs, positions, appointments. It's not just about you. If you don't have the capacity, take a second and go, who else do we know? And answer, yes, we would love to do it. I currently have at least 2 asks. The Maryland Health Benefit Exchange across the board for Hispanic representation for health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If you have an interest in that, send it to me. The point is, we need people to raise their hands, and those of us that are highly visible, we need to ensure that the next set of leaders is developed by putting them in committees, in projects, in sessions. We can't hoard it all. So my asks, and you guys know me by now, I'm very action driven. Be a member of the organization. Let's actually walk the talk. So when Joseline asks for something, when Ashanti asks for something, we have the posse that's ready to go, yo, I'm here, I want it. And number 2, when you hear and see opportunities, they're not just about you. So por favor, take the moment to go, you know what, I heard that guy Ashanti, he is awesome. I think he should be here. Take the moment to connect the dots. The folks that have made it have credibility, right? Let's use that capital. Let's use that social capital, because representation won't change unless we're in the room. And if it's only a handful of people like the Joselines of the world, she can't do it all. So we're missing opportunities because we're not disseminating those. And then I'll be honest, it is not easy to be in those rooms. Katina shared it. You're it. And you're supposed to be representative of all that is Latino. Imagine that. I, as a, light-looking Dominican, I'm supposed to represent all you all. But that's the expectation. So my ask is, let's have a little bit of tolerance, a little bit of patience. We don't always get everything done. Sometimes there's a lot of compromising. If we're going to get X, we can't get this. So my ask is just participate. We, and we, not French. We, the collective we. But let's be kind to one another and let's be strategic. Just play intentionally. So again, I adore being with you guys. I love the numbers. I love the participation. And I think this is beautiful work. So thank you, Gabriela, for the floor.
Oh, no, thank all of you. And I'm seeing a really great comment here to me that's basically saying we are recruiting Latinos to support the infrastructure that we're building. Thank you, Sonia, for that reminder. You heard it from all of us. Only together, yo siempre digo, juntos podemos más. Together we can do more. And Sonia reminds me, juntos logramos más. Together we can accomplish more. So thank you, Ashanti and Veronica and all of you for being here with me today. for being with us here today. Let's just own the we, Mademoiselle Véronique. And yeah, I may speak Spanish, but I also speak French. It's part of that inclusion. So thank you all. Have a great day, great weekend, and I will see you next month. And although we have to change the date because unfortunately we put it on near Thanksgiving, so I think that's not a good idea. Okay, thank you all. Muchísimas gracias a todos. Un abrazo, y I look forward to our next event.